Now, Auckland police say they have grave fears for the safety of the missing British tourist Grace Millane. Officers have spoken to the man who was last seen with Grace before her disappearance on Saturday. Her father, meanwhile, has issued an emotional appeal for anyone with information to come forward to the authorities.
As a family, we've been extremely concerned for her welfare. Grace is a lovely, outgoing, fun-loving, family-orientated daughter. Grace has never been out of contact for this amount of time. She's usually in daily contact with either her mother, myself, her two brothers, members of the family on social media.
Well, Lloyd Figgins is a travel safety expert. Lloyd, when police say, which Auckland police have, they have grave concerns, those are words that the parents never want to hear.
No, absolutely. And you know, this bears all the hallmarks of something having gone pretty catastrophically wrong. And our thoughts and prayers obviously go out to Grace's family. This must be a terrible time for them. But, you know, we really must put this into context. These sorts of events, when people are backpacking and travelling around the world, are exceptionally rare. Most trips that people undertake are without problem at all, and that they're remembered for all the right reasons. So when these things do happen, it just adds to the tragedy.
Because one would have thought that New Zealand is about a safer place that you could travel to.
Yeah, I mean, there's over 3.2 million tourists go to New Zealand every year. And for anyone who's ever visited New Zealand, I've got family there, will know that actually the standards of safety, the standards of security, even in places like Queen Street, which is a backpackers' mecca in Auckland, on most of the bars, on most of the pubs there, they have, you know, security, and on the hostels themselves. So again, this feeds into that whole thing that this is a very rare event. And New Zealand itself, even if we have a look at the health and safety standards with regards all the activities that people like to do in New Zealand, are often far above anywhere else in the world. So it is, you know, it's an adventurous place to go, and it's a mecca for backpackers, but it is also a very, very safe destination.
I mean, these things are very rare events, as you say, but nonetheless, when you're going off travelling, particularly going off travelling by yourself, you do need to think ahead, don't you? What sort of plans do you need to make, emergency plans? What sort of communications back home plans should one make before setting off?
Well, before you set off, I mean, this is all part of the adventure when you go travelling, is actually doing that research. And, you know, when you first arrive in a new location, wherever that might be, you actually don't know the place particularly well, so you have no baseline of what is normal. And it takes a few days for you to be able to establish what is normal in a new environment. And so being able to do a little bit of research before you go to make sure that you understand where you're staying. And sometimes people get caught up in going cheap. Now, cheap is not always safe. So when you're researching your accommodation options, for an example, make sure that you're not just looking at the area that you're staying in, but also the facilities around that. Are those areas safe? Are they going to perhaps attract people to the fact that there are a lot of foreigners in that area who are not particularly familiar with their surroundings, with their environment, and with the dangers that might be inherent within that area?
Now, for families back home, if they haven't heard from a relative who's travelling for a couple of days, how do they know when they need to raise the alarm bell, and who do they contact?
Well, this is why it's really important that people have an emergency response procedure. So when we look at that, we've got to look at when you're going to do those check-in times. Now, social media can work both ways. It can be an excellent tool for letting people know that you're safe and you've arrived in a destination, but it can also be quite an unsafe thing in letting people know what your itinerary is and where you're due to be at a particular time. And be under no illusion that criminals are using social media more than at any time in the past. And so it's really important that people are social media aware, social media savvy. But, you know, the other thing is technology can go against us. When we've got smartphones, we've got apps, and we're relying on those things in order to keep ourselves safe. If that technology gets stolen, we need to have a backup plan. And that's where you need to be thinking about going to places of safety, or safe havens, we would call them. Where is your hotel? How do you know how to get back to your hotel? A top tip would be take a card from the hostel or the hotel that you're staying in, so you've actually got the address. You could give that to a taxi driver. But also, where's the nearest police station? Other places of safety might be a place of worship. Knowing where these things are if you got into danger is really important, but also letting people know if if you're not going to check in with them for a certain amount of time because you're going to be in an area of poor reception or in a remote area, just so that you don't raise alarm bells unnecessarily.
And for people who are travelling alone, particularly young women travelling alone, are there countries that you would say just don't go there?
With you know, to be honest with you, with young ladies travelling overseas, whether you know it's ladies or men, security needs to be at the top of everybody's list. And when we look at some of the countries where it is more unsafe for females to travel, then your first stop has got to be the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the FCO website, and see what they're saying. But don't just stop there. There's some great non-government resources out there. The one that springs to mind to me is a new website called Starling Safety, and that's an interactive website which actually allows tourists to feed in what their experience have been in a particular area or a particular country, and the do's and don'ts that might actually help future travellers before they actually arrive in that country. So there's lots of resources out there. It's a case of making sure you do that planning and that preparation before you go.
Okay, Lloyd Figgins, good to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up in the sport.